The FBI has executed a search warrant at the home of former President Trump. Trump confirming the news in a statement saying Mar-A-Lago in Palm Beach, Florida was, quote, under siege by a large group of agents, and adding the raid was unannounced. NBC News legal analyst Danny Cevallos joins us now. Danny, this is just breaking as we went to air. What do you make of what we're seeing now?
Oh, it's definitely just breaking. I mean, I was called away from dinner just to cover this breaking news. And really what we know right now is just that the FBI apparently has executed a search warrant. And all you know about a search warrant is it means that by definition, the FBI went with an affidavit of probable cause to a magistrate, to a judge, and demonstrated that it is more likely than not that there is evidence of a criminal activity that they need to seize at Mar-A-Lago. That's about all you can glean from the fact that a search warrant has issued. It must be based on probable cause. But of what? It's hard to say. You might infer that just a few days ago, on or around July 27th, the DOJ obtained a search warrant to search the phone of attorney John Eastman, and they've been conducting otherwise an investigation into the activities of January 6th. But again, that's conjecture right now. All we really seem to know is that there apparently is a search warrant being executed, or it was executed at Mar-A-Lago.
And we've seen that search warrant executed, but we haven't heard yet from the FBI. Do you think that they are going to be addressing this in the short term? Because we now have a statement from the former President Trump.
If this were the normal case, I would say that you should not plan to hear from the FBI or the U.S. attorney for that district, because the FBI's usual practice and the federal government's usual practice is not to comment on ongoing investigations. So that would be my normal answer. But this is not the normal case, and this is not the normal, I don't want to say target yet, but this is not the normal person, that being Donald Trump, to have a search warrant issued for his home. So this might be the unusual case where the FBI does hold a press conference and does offer some information to explain why they're executing a search warrant on a former president of the United States, something that just doesn't happen every day. So unprecedented times may call for a breach of the FBI's normal protocol, which is to never, ever talk about ongoing investigation.
And yet we have a former president who is quick, basically, to the presses. I want to read just a little bit from his statement here. He says, nothing like this has ever happened to a president of the United States before. After working and cooperating with the relevant government agencies, this unannounced raid on my home was not necessary or appropriate. It is prosecutorial misconduct, the weaponization of the justice system. And then, Danny, a little bit further down, he says, they even broke into my safe, exclamation point. So we know that they went into his home. They know that we know that they were unannounced. We know that they were looking for things in his safe. Do we know any specifics on what they could have been looking for?
No, but just to give you an idea, if there were search warrants issued for folks like John Eastman, the Trump affiliated lawyer who pushed some of these election fraud theories, then it's not a huge leap to say that Trump's Mar-A-Lago might contain evidence of information related to, say, for example, the evidence that they sought in John Eastman's cell phone or some of these other folks that the DOJ is investigating. That is a rather innocuous interpretation. Of course, another interpretation is simply that the FBI believes that it is more likely than not that there is evidence that Trump or somebody else close to Trump committed a crime, or that they have evidence of that crime at Mar-A-Lago. That could be cell phones, that could be documents, that could be virtually anything. So it's really hard to say at this point. And the FBI, when they get a search warrant like this, they make it as broad as they possibly can. So no surprise that they got a hold of a safe. A safe is something that might contain evidence that is relevant to their investigation. So that's entirely possible. But, you know, these search warrants, they take a while to execute. The FBI goes through all things physical and digital. They catalog everything. They take a lot of photographs. This is not something that happens quickly. It is a long process, a very invasive process. So Trump is probably right. I wouldn't have any reason to disbelieve him that they went into a safe if he had one on the premises. So, again, we don't know exactly what it's for, but given the flurry of activity around January 6th, the committee, which is starting back up in September. It could be related to that. It could be related to something that we had no idea about up until now.
And Danny, the Justice Department is supposed to be nonpartisan. The FBI is supposed to rise above partisan politics. And yet in this statement, we have President Trump or former President Trump saying Democrats broke into the home of the 45th president of the United States. How much is politics going to play into this before the midterms elections?
Yeah, well, the Democrats didn't break into his home. It's the FBI executing a search warrant. So words do matter. I mean, I understand not being happy about the FBI executing a search warrant on one's home, whether you're the former president or just somebody that nobody's ever heard of. It is not a pleasant process. But look, everything about any investigation of Trump is going to be inherently political. No matter what happens, Trump and his circle can claim that it is a political prosecution. And the challenge for the DOJ and Merrick Garland is the fact that, yes, midterms are coming up very soon. And then shortly after that, within a couple of years, another presidential election in which it's very likely that President Trump could be the nominee and running for president again. So Merrick Garland and the DOJ have a really difficult position to be in, which is at what time, if you believe there's probable cause that a former president committed a crime, how do you proceed and have it not be accused of being a political prosecution? This is an unenviable position for Merrick Garland, a difficult one. And that's why I suspect you're seeing a lot of silence from the DOJ on this issue, because they're grappling with timing just like anyone else would.
And in the past, when you see something, nothing like this has ever happened. But in the past, a lot of the accusations of politics come from a team of lawyers, maybe a week, 2 weeks, 3 weeks into an investigation. Here we have it literally minutes after the raid, coming from the former president of the United States. How do they walk that tightrope with making sure that trust in the judicial system and trust in the Justice Department is still maintained?
Complaining that the federal government is engaged in a witch hunt is actually not a new thing to do. White-collar defendants do it all the time. And that's because a lot of white-collar crimes, the defendants often believe that what they did was perfectly lawful. And you see a lot of these similarities in President Trump. He believes that what he has done has been lawful at all times, and he finds that the federal government investigating him is nothing more than a witch hunt. The federal prisons are full of white-collar defendants who believe that they were the victims of a witch hunt. So this kind of narrative is nothing new. If I were Trump's defense attorneys, or if Trump ends up needing defense attorneys, I should say, I would not be happy that the client is putting out press releases like this. But it's President Trump. I mean, former President Trump. He believes that he can talk his way through this issue. He's had a lot of success doing it in the past. If nothing else, he's going to claim, and apparently has claimed in his statement, something to the effect of, look, they've investigated me for a long time. They've never brought anything. And now this is more of a witch hunt. This is more of the same narrative. And Merrick Garland has to realize that if he's going to execute a search warrant, he can't do it willy-nilly. He's got to really believe that there is evidence of a crime on that property to execute a search warrant. And that is the real takeaway here, that Merrick Garland knows that if he's going to make a move in this game of political chess, that he has to make it only when he's certain. So I would suspect that the FBI is more than probable cause. They probably have a lot more evidence than probable cause, because Merrick Garland and the FBI would accept nothing less to execute a search warrant on Mar-A-Lago. It is a very, very significant development, and one that the FBI certainly didn't do lightly.